On this edition of the program, why are the Republican Senate candidates polling so far behind Donald Trump in the states that matter? And we have somebody who worked the border for 30 years to describe to us why human trafficking is more profitable than drug dealing and what changed when Biden came into office. It's all coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics podcast for Friday, March 22nd, 2024. Your old pal, Justin Robert Young, joining you here in Austin, Texas. Good to be here. Good to be back. Good to be with you. Good to be in a very rainy and, by the way, eventful day as I am recording this Thursday. My wife is out in California doing a little networking. And all of a sudden, I got all these text messages. Are you okay? Are you okay? What's happening? I'm like, oh, I think I'm okay. I'm uploading episodes of the Patreon. I'm uploading We're Not Wrong. I'm doing everything that I can do. I just got a text message from the Austin Police Department. It says that there is an active situation in our neighborhood. I'm like, oh, my good Lord. Run downstairs, open up the window. It's a lady walking her dog. It's a light mist of a rain. Pretty much it. Come to find out that about a block down from where we are, there was a erratic person who was making terroristic threats, reportedly. I don't know this for sure, but waving a gun at a neighbor. And so it took a little bit of time to unlodge that. But at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a text message saying I can resume normal activities. I no longer need to shelter in place, which is good. I had already left and recorded another podcast with Brian Brushwood, but it was good to know. It was good to know. Thank you to the Austin Police Department for taking care of that. But that's pretty much as exciting as a workday gets from a work-from-home full-time podcaster like I am. Let's get into a curious phenomenon. It is not a secret to say that Donald Trump would win an election with Joe Biden were it to happen today. Good for the president that it does not happen until November. It at least gives him time to try and change the mind of several states, among them Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Arizona, Montana, Nevada, and Arizona. Right now, Donald Trump is leading in each and every one of them. But there's something else that's very odd. And that is that those states also have Senate seats up. The Democrats have an extraordinarily bad map in this year. So if the Republicans have a chance to flip the Senate, and I do believe it would be a historic embarrassment if the Republicans were not able to do it, just considering the seats that are up. The deck is stacked against the Dems in 2024. But in all those states that I named, while Biden lags, the people in the Senate are leading. Now, granted, again, it's a bad map for the Democrats. So the good news for them is that they have the power of incumbency. These are all sitting Democratic senators. But then again, for the Republicans, they are thrilled because that means they have the chance to flip them. So we're going to go state by state here. These are the most current polls that we have. Michigan, this is a Hill Emerson poll. This is Trump plus third parties. So Kennedy, Cornel West, Jill Stein. Donald Trump up in Michigan by 2. Well, let's take a look at the likely Senate, the Senate race there in Michigan. Mike Rogers is favored to win that primary. Senator Slotkin is the Democrat. And right now, Slotkin's up by 2. So that means in this same poll, Slotkin is outrunning Biden by 4 points. Let's take a look next door to Wisconsin, shall we? Trump versus Biden plus third parties. Trump up 3. Okay, well, how about Tammy Baldwin versus Hoved? That is the likely Republican. Well, 2 different polls with the Hill Emerson. Baldwin is up 3. Actually, I think I just read that twice. It's just one poll. So in that situation, you have Baldwin outrunning Biden by 6. And this is not an isolated trend. Let's take a look at Ohio. Ohio is a state that who knows even how much Joe Biden is going to try to win Ohio. It is a solid red state at this point. Trump versus Biden plus third parties is a Trump plus 10 in an East Carolina University poll. Hill Emerson has it as Trump plus 9. But when we look at Sherrod Brown, the Democratic senator from Ohio, versus the newly minted GOP standard bearer that will go mano a mano with him in November, Bernie Moreno, we have Brown plus 4, Brown plus 6, and Brown plus 5. That means if you take it on the extreme, Sherrod Brown is outrunning Joe Biden by 16 points in this state. Swing on down to Arizona. Trump versus Biden plus third parties is a Trump plus 8, according to Hill Emerson. We look at the now 1v1, because we're taking Kyrsten Sinema out of it. That means there is no incumbent in this race. Carrie Lake versus Ruben Gallego. Gallego up by 2. So in the extremes, we have Gallego outrunning Biden by 10. These are not small numbers. This is an indication of something. And I got further proof. How about Nevada? All these states but Ohio, Biden won in 2020 for the record. These are not unwinnable states. Nevada. Trump versus Biden plus third parties is Trump plus 5. That's Hill Emerson. Noble Predictive Insights has Trump plus 7. But Brown versus Senator Rosen, Republican versus Democrat for the Senate. Noble Predictive Insights has Rosen plus 6, outrunning Biden by 13 points in the same poll. But here's the craziest one to me. The craziest one, Montana. Montana is not competitive at all. Everything else we've named, you can make an argument for spending money there, especially because Joe Biden's going to have a lot of it. You can compete in Ohio. Hell, you could even probably spend some money in Florida and Texas. It ain't going to get you anywhere, but at the very least, you can prove to those local state parties that you do try when the lights are on. Montana, a single dime that you spend there, if you are Joe Biden, is a dime absolutely wasted. You might as well bury it in the front yard of the White House, okay? To prove that, Joe Biden versus Trump plus third parties in Montana. This is the Hill Emerson poll. Trump plus 21. But let's take a look at Senator John Tester, Democrat, versus Tim Sheehy. He's the Republican challenger. Right now, that is Tester plus 2. That means that John Tester is currently outrunning President Biden by 23 points. Candidates do matter in this scenario. And everybody that I just named on the Democratic side, outside of Ruben Gallego, are incumbents. They know their constituency, and by and large, the constituency seems to be pretty happy with them, even if they are not happy with Joe Biden. But you can't look at double-digit outrunning in all of these states without drawing some kind of conclusion about how Democrats are reacting to Biden. And I don't think that it is crazy to say that they are not in love. Joe Biden is uniquely unpopular in this scenario. So what do you do with that? Well, again, you're thankful that all of this is happening in March and not October or November. But it does show that Joe Biden has a lot of work to do. The Democratic message is resonating. Right now, it's just not resonating with Joe. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That is where you get all of our content. Now, everything that we do has a video version. You can find our video version on YouTube. You can also find our video version on Patreon, including the bonus episodes that we do twice a week. Our Sunday edition and our late edition on Thursdays. Let's get into some of the stories that we did not cover here today. House Speaker Mike Johnson is steadfastly proceeding with a government funding plan despite renewed threats from House conservatives. These threats include potential actions against Johnson himself and stem from dissatisfaction with the spending deal that Johnson negotiated with Democrats and the expedited manner in which he is moving the legislation forward. Tensions have escalated after the legislative text for the significant spending bill was released unexpectedly overnight, leading to direct warnings from Representative Ralph Norman, a House Freedom Caucus member. Norman expressed mixed feelings about Johnson's leadership capabilities, highlighting the evolving frustrations among conservatives who had previously ousted a speaker for similar reasons. Despite these internal conflicts, there's a recognition of the potential fallout from another speaker election. How many of these you gonna do? And then go and ask the American public, we need a bigger House majority. Although maybe this is actually the advertisement on why you need a bigger House majority. Of course, this situation is compounded by Johnson's efforts to mitigate conservative backlash by emphasizing Republican victories within the funding package during private meetings. These attempts have not assuaged conservative anger, as you might imagine, with members like Representative Chip Roy criticizing Johnson's leadership and the funding deals as a big old failure. The conservative faction's main strategy of opposition has been to obstruct the House proceedings, a tactic that might continue in protest to the deal. This internal discord poses a significant challenge to Johnson's leadership, with his future potentially hanging in the balance post-2024 election. What do you want this man to do? Let me ask this to Republicans in the House. What do you want him to do? He's got a razor-thin majority in the House. We are like 2 flu cases away from having no majority at all. You don't control the Senate, and you don't control the White House. So you can fight, but you don't got the guns. You don't have the ammunition. There is a line between bravery and stupidity. But if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. And boy, do some of these House Freedom Caucus people seem really, really excited. They seem really tough because I don't know what you're getting. I don't know what you expect to get from a speaker that is doing on-the-job training because of you, because of some of you, many of you, and no majority. Look, I know that Mike Johnson's a religious man, but do you want him to turn water into wine? And if you think that shutting down the government is going to be a PR coup, well, show me when it has been. I understand there's a lot of frustration around government spending. I understand it, and I'm sympathetic to that argument. But the way that you tried to do it has not worked. So, I don't know. New York Attorney General's office has initiated the process of potentially seizing former President Donald Trump's Seven Springs golf resort and private estate by filing judgments in Westchester County. This action follows Judge Arthur Erdogan's ruling in a civil fraud trial against Trump, the Trump Organization, and its top executives, including Trump's sons, Eric and Donald Jr. The judgment, entered just over a week before the filings, found them liable for fraudulently inflating Trump's net worth for tax and insurance benefits, resulting in a $464 million penalty plus interest. Trump faces a critical deadline to post $454 million in surety bonds plus interest to halt asset seizure while appealing Erdogan's decision. Failure to post the bond could, of course, enable Attorney General Letitia James to begin asset seizure as a means of enforcing the judgment. Trump's legal team admitted difficulty in securing full appeals bonds due to insufficient liquid assets, proposing a $100 million bond instead. This proposal comes amidst revelations from an insurance broker about the practical challenges of securing a bond of the required magnitude given the Trump organization's real estate-heavy asset portfolio. However, the state has countered, suggesting multiple bonds could distribute the surety risk, and criticized the credibility of the broker's testimony due to his connections with Trump. This legal development marks a significant step toward potentially recovering Trump properties in New York, including the iconic 40 Wall Street and Trump Tower, as part of the judgment enforcement process. And the fundraising text went out as soon as this news hit yesterday. I believe the verbiage of the text that I got was "keep your hands off Trump Tower." This is beyond my purview in terms of legal and finance kind of stuff, but that's a lot. You don't just go down to, Max Cherry's bail bonds from Jackie Brown and throw a Raptor bag of cash like Sam Jackson did. That's not how this, this is $500 million. You need a $500 million bond. That's a lot. And finally, the Justice Department sued Apple on Thursday, alleging the company illegally maintained a monopoly over smartphones in a wide-ranging lawsuit. DOJ was joined by 16 bipartisan state attorney generals in the lawsuit, which was filed in New Jersey. It alleges that Apple limits competition and hurts consumers, developers, and small businesses through its operation of the company's App Store, limiting functions of third-party smartwatches and hurting the quality of cross-platform messaging. Quote, DOJ District Attorney Jonathan Cantor in a statement, "For years, Apple responded to competitive threats by imposing a series of whack-a-mole contractual rules and restrictions that have allowed Apple to extract higher prices from consumers, impose higher fees on developers and creators, and to throttle competitive alternatives from rival technologies." Here's my take on this. The entire DOJ case will hinge on them proving that iOS, the operating system that runs Apple smartphones and tablets, is not a wholly owned operating system for their products, but rather a marketplace. A marketplace that Apple has unfairly used their position to squeeze out competition and make both their devices and their consumers' lives worse. That's what you need to prove. You need to prove that there was harmful effects onto your customer base. That's going to be a stretch. You've had similar lawsuits filed by Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite. And in reading through this particular case, it's a pretty comprehensive greatest hits of people that have been mad at Apple for all the things that people tend to be mad at Apple for, specifically the amount of money that they take from App Store apps, the inability that apps have to push people to non-app related ways so they can avoid the cut that they would otherwise have to pay Apple, the inability to put some apps on the App Store, the fact that Apple prioritizes their own apps. This is going to be a very uphill climb for the DOJ, in my opinion. But I do think there is a conversation, and we've seen this with TikTok as well, that maybe the way that we've thought of technology does need to be rethought. For me, as somebody who, grew up in a world without iOS, the fact that iOS exists and is very, very popular does not seem like a marketplace to me. But I'm old. And if you look at the money that runs through iOS right now, it's the GDP of many, many, many countries combined. So if it's not a marketplace, then what is? Is the fact that iOS is new shielded? Or are there technical things that we need to consider? I bring up the TikTok thing because if 177 million people all watching a video platform isn't a media company on par with a television or radio station, let alone a network of television or radio stations, then what is it? Because the FCC bars foreign ownership of all of those. No such law for apps or social media. Should that change? I don't know. But it is something that we should probably think about because the world has moved very, very fast. And not all startups are startups. Not all underdogs are underdogs. Not all pieces of technology are thought of as shiny and new and need to be protected. A lot of livelihoods are built on iOS. But we'll see. That is your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go. 2 bonus episodes each and every week. And now, on to Mr. Chris Clem. Our guest today is retired Border Patrol Sector Chief Chris Clem. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
So we met each other down at the border in McAllen a couple weeks ago, and I'm kind of glad that we didn't sit down and talk then because I feel like this situation has continued to evolve. But before we get into the news of the day, can you just explain your career as a Border Patrol agent over the nearly 3 decades that you did it?
Yeah, no, thank you for allowing me to do that. I came in 1995 as a young GS5 Border Patrol agent trainee assigned to El Paso sector, but a small station out in southwestern New Mexico called Lordsburg, New Mexico. And it was quite a culture shock for me, having been born in New Orleans, grew up in Houston. I had more people in my high school in Houston when I graduated in the 80s than the whole town and county had. So a little bit of adjustment, but I fell in love with the job. I mean, my office was outdoors. It was in the mountains. It was tracking people. It was, performing a national security job, and we didn't even realize it at the time. I had great opportunities to learn, to hone my skills out in New Mexico. I promoted to a senior position in West Texas for a few years, back to New Mexico as a supervisor, and then kind of went up the ranks and commanded 4 separate stations over the course of my career, both in New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. Because of that, and I was in the the heat of the battle in Arizona, getting things under control in Casa Grande, which was at the time in 2010 when I took command of that station was pretty much the busiest in the nation as far as people and narcotics. We got that tempered down, and I guess they wanted the formula, and they said come up to D.C. I don't know. Washington, D.C. tours are kind of like being in the penalty box. You age in dog years. I was there for 2.5 years. It felt like a decade. And then I promoted out of there to the deputy chief of New Orleans, Louisiana sector, which was a challenge, right? Because it wasn't, the southern border or the northern border. It was a coast. We didn't have landings in Louisiana, but it was a lot of trafficking and smuggling from the southern border. Came back to Arizona for a short time because I had been away from my family for a few years, and then promoted into the senior executive service as the deputy chief in El Paso. I got the call September 30th, 2017. Said, congratulations, you're going to be an SES, and we're going to assign you to El Paso. That took a few months process to get into that position, and I was in El Paso right when things were really kind of getting hectic, and I spent 2.5 long years there. And promoted to the chief patrol agent in Yuma. And just when I thought things were going to calm down and we had a change in administrations, and wow, I was at ground zero in Yuma for 2 years. So it was, I mean, there was so much to fill in 27 and a half years wearing the uniform. But, I take a lot lot in the agency I worked for. I was a Border Patrol agent, tried and true. I'm humbled to be leading men and women in this organization, but it was also the right time for me to get out. I've been away from my family for quite a while, and I didn't think policies were going to align with my integrity and values and how I think we should secure the border. And so it worked out well for me. I was eligible to retire, and I was in the position to do it, so I did it.
And it sounds like it is well-deserved considering all the time that you put in. Before we get into stuff that is happening now, obviously exempting the New Orleans or Louisiana posting, what in general are you looking for as a Border Patrol agent, understanding that you were at several different points in a very, very long border, but to generalize it, in your previous career before we get to our modern era, what are you looking for?
It is a law enforcement. The profession itself is very complicated and complex. You're dealing with people with some mostly bad intent. So I've kind of, I don't want to say dumb it down, but for the ease of understanding, easier for me to explain, is when you're out there as a Border Patrol agent, you've got 2 points that are actually ports of entry where people are supposed to lawfully come in. Anyone that comes in between those 2 points, they're fair game. They have violated the U.S. law, and that's what we're out there. We were out there to control and contain. First and foremost is terrorists and terrorist weapons. We don't want anything bad to happen to us. Then you've got your criminals, and then just illegal migration that's coming through. But we're out there patrolling the desert, patrolling the waterways, depending on what part of the southern border you're on, whether it's Texas or New Mexico or Arizona, California. You're in these arduous conditions, mountaintops, the low desert flatlands, very thick mesquite brush and salt cedars in Texas, and you're looking for anything that shows evidence of an incursion or an intrusion in the United States, and your job is to resolve that. And it is difficult at times, and it is the methods and how we do things. Well, we started off almost 100 years ago on horseback, and we still use horses today. Yet we've evolved to using drones as well. So it's the tried and true methods still apply today, but we take advantage of technology and equipment out there to really intercept and interdict anything and anyone that comes into the United States illegally.
So this is, I think, a very important part to understand where we are now, that there are lawful places for which somebody who is coming into the United States or would, let's say, as has become a big issue now, claim asylum. There are points of entry for that. Your job is not to man those per se, but rather to find anybody who is not coming through those channels. And those people can be anywhere from somebody trying to illegally immigrate or human trafficking or drug smuggling being probably the top 3, unless there's something that I'm missing.
No, you're right. And that's the important thing to differentiate is there are lawful pathways. There are international accepted asylum practices for those that are going to use the asylum seeking process. And then there are those that are looking to apply for admission to the United States through visa process, through temporary visa process. Those that are looking to immigrate. There's all that is designed and built into our legislative body, that is the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Homeland Security Act, all those things. If you come in between the ports of entry, you are purposely violating the law, and that's how it's addressed, and that's where it gets really convoluted with a lot of people, is they think, oh, well, these people are coming over here illegally, but they're seeking asylum. Well, there's a process for that, and it's not coming in illegally at 500 at a time in a hole in the fence. That's not asylum seeking. That's illegal entry and using asylum as a claim to extend your stay and wait for a judge's hearing. So we can talk a little bit more of that, but
we will. Trust me, we will. I want to get into that in detail.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing that I took away from the trip down to McAllen, especially from my perspective, and usually this show is almost exclusively about elections, and this has obviously become something that isn't just, normally I would talk about border stuff in Republican primaries because it
Right.
is an animating element of a Republican primary. When it gets to the general, things tended to tamp down. That's not the case this time, and it's led me to want to understand the issue more. And the biggest thing that I took away from that border trip was, I think if we're trying to really understand this, we do need to separate immigration from border security. They are both very important, but solving one does not solve the other, despite the fact that they are related. You could have a fully secure border and still have a messed up immigration system. Could have the gold standard for an immigration system that everybody's happy with, and we still and have an open border, and it would still be a problem. Do you think does that track that we should be, from your perspective, separating these things?
I am so glad that you listened to me when we were in McAllen, because that has been my, talking point for probably a decade or more, and especially since I've retired and been speaking at the border and bringing the border across the country, is they are related, but they're not mutually exclusive. And mainstream media outlets, politicians, they love to conflate the two because it can get emotional. And we've seen over the last few election cycles how emotional and vitriolic and divisive immigration and border security are when they're conflated. Now, let me just take this back a little bit, because it's the State of the Union address, and it's making its rounds again when Bill Clinton gave it, and I think in 1994 or early 95, when he talked about border security, he talked about immigration. So this has gone full circle multiple times, from a Democrat-led initiative in the 90s to a Republican talking point for the last few years. But what you said and what you observed down there in McAllen is so important. We absolutely have to start with securing the border. That is protecting Americans. That is protecting the American way of life, the communities down here, from bad people and bad things coming across. You have to figure out a way, from the immigration perspective, to clean up the mess that's been created for decades, the loopholes that are jamming the system for those that are trying to do it the right way and those that are in the kind of the loophole vortex. But what we've also seen and we've learned is that not everybody that's coming over here wants to stay here forever. They want to come over here, get a job, make some money, get some training, maybe get educated, and they'll go back if there's opportunities for them. Also, our American businesses, whether if they can't find the workforce here in the United States, they've got to seek it from other places. And that's so jammed up because the system is overworked and overbooked and everything. Again, my wheelhouse, where I spent my career, was on the border security side. And immigration, when we've seen it working smooth, you have a natural decline in the illegal immigration, which frees up our agents to actually focus on countering the criminal networks, targeting the human traffickers, the narcotics traffickers, and God forbid, terrorists with their terrorist weapons coming in. That's the key. Secure the border first, and then we can start everywhere else. But man, it's so easy for Congress to want to put one big bill together and then blame the other side. So you'll vote for me again, and next year we'll fix it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it has become a very, very profitable issue, and that's something that we focus on a lot on this show, is that there are some problems that they don't want to solve because whenever they send an email with certain keywords in it, it returns with a lot of money, and ultimately that is the profit motive for them, is making sure they continue to run for office and have the infrastructure there. Now, when you talk about focusing on the criminal syndicates, who are we talking about specifically?
Well, you're talking about cartel organizations. There's so many to name, but they're the ones that are kind of like the head of the snake that are controlling anything and everything that's coming into the United States through our southern border and quite honestly, our northern border and coastal. They're just got their hands in everything. They're commodity neutral. They're a huge business organization, and nothing comes into the United States, especially through Mexico, without paying something to someone cartel related. So this is a business project for them. They have realized that smuggling people and trafficking people is almost risk averse compared to narcotics trafficking. Now, they're still in that business. But people are paying on the front end, majority of them are paying on the front end just to get into the United States. And with wide gaps along our southern border, they're able to fly into to Mexico, get to our southern border, Mexico's northern border, and the cartel's able to push them through a gap. And that's pretty much the job of the smuggling organization at that point, because they've gotten the money up front or the arrangements up front. Border Patrol is going to take these people into custody, process them. There's going to be no place to detain them, so they're going to be released, and they're going to go to where they're ultimately going. And now their immigration hearings are 4, 5, 6, 7 years out, and the cartel's getting paid one way or the other. So it becomes a great business model for them. Where narcotics, they have to receive the precursors, they have to make the narcotics, they have to figure out a way to conceal it to get it into the United States, it has to get delivered, and the money still has to come back to them because they don't. So people are the profit-making business for the cartel's industry, and that's why it's so frustrating when we see politics get involved, because they are actually handing a business blueprint to the bad guys on how to move people in the United States.
It's so funny because there was the conversations that we had down there were with people saying it's $8,000, around $8,000 to $10,000 to get into America, and the pathway that you have to go from there. I mean, you're not paying. This isn't a travel agency, right? You are not paying people for whom comfort is going to be something that they care about. And I'm using euphemistic terms, but the stories here are skin-peelingly horrifying.
Yes.
When like, if you only get extorted, you've had the best version of this experience comparatively with some of the stuff that happens. That being said, when I got done with that trip, there's an element where we try to keep it even keel here that I wanted to not just repeat every factoid that I found. And then about a week later, Joe Biden goes to the border and says the same thing. So now it is kind of entered into the common understanding of information that this is reality. But from your perspective, that is around the amount. It's $8,000, and like you said, it's $8,000 up front, and once you shove them through the fence, good luck. Unless you want to recruit them on the other side for something, then you're kind of, that's it per head.
Yeah, 8,000 is right in between 5 and 15. That was the going rate, depending on where they were coming from, where they were ending up. When I was chief in Yuma, that was the range, and obviously there were some high dollar things beyond 15,000 that we encountered, depending on where they were coming from, what their means were. But yeah, the most of this stuff is all handled on the phone, through the internet. They're making the arrangements. They're being recruited. There's videos out there in multiple languages showing you how to get to the United States. I mean, it is a complete business for people that are profiting off migrants who are being sold a bill of goods. And you mentioned something that is the journey, and that's the part that is really ugly and really frustrates me when I hear certain political folks talk about this is a humanitarian crisis. Well, it's a humanitarian crisis because we have created policies and pull factors by talking heads that are encouraging, incentivizing people to make the trip, putting them in the hands of evil. Again, if you have to pay twice as much as you expected to pay, that was an easy trip because, again, we're grown-ups here, but I'm not going to get into details, but you can imagine the amount of sexual assaults, physical assaults, emotional assaults, the kidnappings, everything that takes place. And it's all power trip to show who's in charge. And, it's a real story when you talk to young women who take birth control because they were going to make this journey knowing they would be sexually assaulted, or going to the pharmacy and getting some kind of morning after pill because they expected to be raped along the journey. That is no way for a country that claims to be immigrant friendly and wants to promote positive immigration to put policies and things in place that, create this opportunity for the bad guys to exploit people. And that's why, again, the border security piece is so prevalent, but this is how we have to, I like to say tall fences, wide gates, right? Tall fences is securing the border, not just the physical barrier, but the technology and everything that comes with it. But the wide gates are the lawful pathways that we can open and close depending on the needs of the United States and what's going on around the world. There will be times where we need to open them wide because there's wars and persecution, and there's times where we need to narrow it down, like right now when we've got an overlogged system, right? So when we can do that and we can combine, efforts to, keep the security piece going, building on that, and separately focus on the right immigration pathways. Again, not together, not one big bill, because that's where things get ugly. But boy, that's going to save lives. People are going to recognize that it's clear understanding how you come to the United States, and you don't, or at least you minimize the risk of putting yourselves in harm's way just to get here. Because the days of mom and pop groups coming in just to look for work, I mean, it's big business now. It is. You don't come across without paying, and it gets the emotions going, because it's frustrating that lives are at risk, and we're not doing a better job as a country, as a body of Congress and the executive branch to put the political football aside and actually get down to business.
If we are to get a little bit into the political element of this, the numbers do bear out that we have had a tremendous amount of crossovers, and specifically asylum seekers, since Joe Biden took office. I know in hearing your talk that you believe that this is no coincidence, that there were specific elements that Joe Biden put in place that caused this. Could you detail that for us?
Yeah, and I will detail it, and I'll give you just some numbers too. Look, we building the wall, and you heard me talk about that. That was candidate Trump at the time. We're going to build the wall. It was easy to remember. When he became President Trump, he recognized from the Border Patrol, specifically from the ground up, agents to the sector chiefs like myself, and all the way up to the White House. Look, it is more than just a wall. It is lights, cameras, access roads. We need some strong policies that provide consequences for illegal entry. And he got that. He still wanted his wall, and we convinced him that, hey, it needs to be this way. It doesn't need to. We have to see through it, because we need to see what the enemy or the threat picture is like. It doesn't need to be from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. There's places where it absolutely has to be there. We like to say in urban areas it's especially important, because the vanishing point is seconds to minutes. But the wall is designed to impede or deny entry, or control and contain entry. You combine that with technology in the form of lights and cameras, sensors, access roads, so agents can get places quicker. That works, and we saw that, and we started building that out in early, probably late 2017. We started seeing a lot of the stuff working. He had a lot of battles, the administration, a lot of battles with Congress during the midterms, and it was slow rolling. But boy, we made a lot of progress. And then when the election happened in 2020, and Biden took over in 21, he signed, I think the number was 94 executive orders in the first 30 days that were focused on immigration and border security and things like that. But what he did that was the most devastating to us as agents and to the country as far as security was he stopped building the wall. And that was the wall system, not just the steel construction, but everything I mentioned, the whole package. And he ended the policies of the Migrant Protection Protocol, which closed asylum loopholes, also known as Remain in Mexico, third country asylum agreements. He halted deportations for 100 days. He reduced ICE's detention capability. Everything that was part of the immigration enforcement continuum that is the foundation of integrity to our immigration system was pretty much undone within the first hours and days of this administration. Now, so those things can all be researched, and you could see it, and you can see the facts. But I'll also give you the numbers. In 2019, we had just over 900,000 arrests across the United States at the border. In 2020, it dropped to 405,000. So when everything came into fruition, right, things were put in place. In 21, the end of federal fiscal year 21, it went up to 1.66 million. And in 22, it went up to 2.2 million. Then in 23, it was over 2.2, close to 2.4 million. And we're tracking to be somewhere between 3 and 2.2 million at the end of this fiscal year. So policies, border security packages, all that when it was working made a big difference. I mean, it was under a million and even reduced. And I know some people argue, well, you had the pandemic and all that stuff. Everything that was turned away, we just didn't have the flow. People weren't coming across because they couldn't come across. And if you did, there was a consequence. Even if you just went from 900,000 to 1.66 million to take 2020 out, take the pandemic year out of it, it's still double what we had under the final years of President Trump. So speeches, political rhetoric, campaign promises, and executive actions all coming together. Pretty much, we handed this administration the most secure border we had from my perspective and many others, at least at that point, 25 years of my career.
Yeah.
We handed that to them, and it was all taken away from us. And now because the poll numbers are so low on border security and immigration, it's the final quarter or half of an election year. We're getting close to November.
Crunch time.
So, so it's Hail Mary. We better make a border visit. We better point fingers and blame you didn't pass my bill type rhetoric. And it couldn't be. It all starts at the top, and that's the White House. And so if they're going to blame anybody, blame the White House. We had a team that was ready to help transition this administration. We always expect some changes when there's a political change in the White House, but no one expected it really to be this bad. I mean, a few little policy changes here, but who's going to stop building the wall? Who's going to tear down construction? Who's going to just leave steel out there, bales of wire, and cameras that were poles and cameras mounted, but we couldn't turn on? I mean, who does that after it's already been bought and paid for by the taxpayers? It's tough, man. It's tough.
So I heard that during your speech, and then I spoke with you afterward, and this was the big thing for me, is whenever there's something that makes too much sense from my perspective, I always have my gut reaction is I need to double check it. And so the fact that this happened immediately, that there was not but a few months maybe of a gap between Joe Biden being elected and this surge, would suggest to me that the professional elements of people coming across, and let's also preface this, that the vast majority of the people that are coming across now are crossing outside of those legal ports of entry. They're being caught by Border Patrol, and they're claiming asylum. That is not a controversial thing. That is just what's happening. But if that's the case, that would mean that the professional element of this is as media literate as I am. They were watching the same campaign rallies as I was, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Do I really have that much of a similar media profile from somebody in a Mexico cartel? That seems a little crazy for me. So I had to ask you, and you said, yes, indeed they are extraordinarily media literate.
Yeah, so they are, and we have seen that, especially with the advent of social media and the various platforms, and people can put things out there instantaneously. We had we called it a Trump effect when at the end of Obama's term, once Trump was elected in November of 16, that there was a huge surge, from November to January, because the word was out. If you don't get in now, he's going to build a wall, or there's going to be deportation. So we saw an uptick in numbers across the southwest border, and then there was a pretty much a lull in the action. It was very manageable. And then during the midterms, when there was all the controversy about are we going to fund a wall? Where is he going to get the money? So when that is talked about, that the president's actions or desires may not be fulfilled or come to fruition, that's a marketing scheme, again, to come across. Now, fast forward to the campaign for the 2020 presidency, you even have on the Democratic debates where, President Biden is saying, I would say, surge to the border, come to the border. I know his intent was, basically bashing President Trump's policy.
Yes.
But that's picked up on by people, and it's used by the smuggling organizations. And as I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, there's I think 14 different languages. There's YouTube videos on how to get across. So yes, they are absolutely monitoring every election, not just the president, but House and Senate, because they know that's how the appropriations and budgets are going. Boy, the bad guys, I think both domestically and internationally, when we are approaching a furlough or a budget government shutdown,
As
They
we are
know
this
that,
week.
Yeah, that's going to cause problems, and people are going to have to plan and adjust, and that makes us vulnerable. So they're going to take advantage of that. So it is absolutely, paramount that, I understand the transparency that people want to put out there, but it comes with the consequence, and that's going to be the bad actors and the organizations that are profiting off people are watching.
And I think that's the biggest reframing that I had, was that if you think of this kind of mass migration as just a dinner bell being rung, and then all of a sudden people from around the world are coming, then that does stretch the limits of your imagination. But if you look at this as an advertising element, and for professional organizations who are making a lot of money to get people from here to there and put them across the border, knowing that our asylum system is by any definition stretched absolutely thin, that does make more sense that this happens immediately, as opposed to something that is a slow build that might crescendo 3 years in.
Well, let's even look at it right now. What they're up against, and what they could be up against even right now. And when I say them, the border patrol, border security experts, you have candidate Trump now, former President Trump, talking about, we're going to finish what we started. We're going to do deportation operations and all that.
Yeah.
And yet, you don't have anything coming out of what we're going to do if we win out of the current administration. Just trying to do some pandering to say they're working on the border. What I see, and kind of on the same theme, what the bad guys are doing is like, you're going to have to get in now, because here's the reason. If you get in now and President Biden was to get reelected, you're safe. You're not going to get removed. There'll be no deportations. If you don't get in now, even if Trump is elected, what he can do is he can secure the border and hit policies hard to keep you from coming in. The likelihood of mass deportation roundups, I don't know if we have the political will to do that. So I think this is, again, a perfect time and a perfect storm for the cartels and the smuggling organizations to continue to press people to come over here, because if Biden wins, they're going to continue their marketing and their business model. If Trump or somebody else wins, that is going to focus on securing the border, people are going to say, we better get in now. I expect a surge between now and the election, and then depending on the results of the election, it'll be another surge before January, because you only have, if you look at, Biden's not talking about securing the border as a primary goal. Obviously, Trump is. Bobby Kennedy's talking about that. So 3 that could be on the big ballot at the end of the day, 2 of the 3 are talking about securing the border. So if that was to happen, if I'm the smuggling organizations, this is how they're marketing. And this is, again, goes back to the rhetoric and the media and how we do things. So I don't see anything letting off the gas right now until we see the results of November. And then we'll see which trajectory we're going to go.
You mentioned that being close to the hive of actual politics was something that aged you, like the dude who picks up the Grail at the end of Indiana Jones.
Right.
But obviously, you do have to be aware of what happens in the political fault lines on this issue that did affect your career for oh so many years. Has it surprised you to see it become more of a bipartisan issue than it has been in the past?
Well, I don't want to be naive on that answer, but I want to say it's about time. I'm glad maybe people are listening to us. It is always, like as we mentioned earlier, it kind of ebbed and flowed, just whichever political person was in power, how they were, or a party was in power. But the recent, I'd say, last 18 months, it started resonating with both parties because of the impacts, right? We're already dealing with the economic issues, inflations, and coming out of a pandemic, all those things. But then when you add the number of people that have been released into the country that are showing up in sanctuary cities and overwhelming small communities at the border, and then showing up in New York and Chicago and Denver, and all of these are usually Democrat-led cities that have been welcoming these folks, and now they're like, oh, wait a second, now we've got a problem. So I hate the fact that we people have become the reason for this problem, because it should be about securing the border and a better immigration process. However, if this, and I want to make sure I use my words correctly here, but if this anxiety or this problem is brings us closer to some sort of resolution, then it was worth it, right? That's the way I look at it. Now, I don't agree with that bipartisan Senate bill. It had nothing to do with securing the border. It had more to do with facilitating processing. And, there was only one thing that was strong about it, and that was detention. But by the way, they were going to increase the ICE detention space to 50,000. That's what they had when this administration came in, because that administration cut it in half. But it signaled and targeted the numbers before they could act, which means they could act. They just were not going to act until they hit a certain number. But to your question, it raised that bipartisan effort. And to me, that was the most important, because the contents in the bill I thought were dead on arrival from the House. The House had a very strong bill that was focused on security. Again, going back to my point, they focused on border security. The other side of the aisle has to conflate it. They want to make it about immigration. Let's have a strong standalone border security bill. Let's keep Americans safe and those that are within our borders safe. And then let's talk about how we clean up the immigration mess, because that's going to look, a border security bill could be done very, very quickly. Immigration bill is going to take some time, because there's so much to it, right?
Yes.
But I guess I'm happy that it's taken on a bipartisan approach. My only concern is, again, what I've been working hard to is try to separate the two. I'm just afraid when it becomes bipartisan, they're going to want to have this big bill so they can high five each other and go back to their district.
Well, the reality is that it was worse than that, because it wasn't an immigration bill at all. It was a Ukraine bill, and they were trying to staple whatever they could on top of it to make sure that it was a spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down.
Right.
But anyway, there's that. Retired Border Sector Chief Chris Clem, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak to us.
You got it. Thanks for having me on and continue to talk about this topic. It's important to all Americans, and let's hopefully we continue down a path of trying to find a solution. And welcome to come back on anytime you want to have me.
Oh, you will. Thank you so much. And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics is written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. If you would like to thank Chris Clem, you can do so. Letter P, letter X, number 3, guest.com. Of course, you can find and follow and share clips of the show. TikTok is Justin R. Young. Instagram is Justin R. Young. On YouTube, you can find us Politics. On X, it is PX3 tweets for the show, Justin R. Young for me. TheYoungAmerican@gmail.com is where you can send emails, and you can find this show at px3podcast.com. Letter P, letter X, number 3, podcast.com. If you'd like to support us with a one-time donation, the only way to do it, well, not the only way. There's many ways to do it. Pick your poison. PayPal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20, and our Cash App is PX3 Cash. You can send me anything you'd like in the mail. P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas. Again, that is Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. The only way that you can get our bonus content, however, is through TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Video versions of everything. Video versions of the exclusive stuff, video versions of the free stuff. It's all available. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you those 2 bonus podcasts each week, covering all the news that we miss on our free podcasting schedule. And our $10 tier gets your name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks in the Titanic $10 tier. Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, invoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order. Brian, Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checker. Sarah Jeannie, Spider, Matthew, Dr. G, Dustin, Brad, D-Laser, Nick, just another pilot, middle-aged Mike, Utah, Jimmy, Montana, the Jen, Elo, D. Reilly, Andrew, Lisa, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Devon, the CFP, Gloria, my mom, Gray Zone, Peepaw, Jay, Neil, Ye Old Pinball Shop, John, DP4 Bungo, Neil, His Nerdiness Charles, Audrey Stoll, Adler Spot, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Berkeley, Stephen, Pneumatic Terran, Molly's Delightful Demeanor, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, and Paul. You want your name read on the show. Folks, only one place to do it. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. We will be back next week. You'll get a Monday show if you are on the Patreon. On the free feed, we've got Dave Leventhal on the program, and we have a voice on organizing the progressive wing of the political spectrum. So we will peek into that world. But that's next week. Till then, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss all three.